Going for boost over. Well, I think going for boost if you're a boost merchant, like someone like AJ or someone, you go for boost.
100% of the time.
Yes.
Always, every second of every game. Ball's going in your net, don't worry about it. Go get the boost and make sure you've got the full 100 to celebrate with the other team.
Oh God. Never. Yeah, never. Always go for ball.
Yeah.
Number one rule of Rocket League.
Welcome to the Boost Over Ball podcast, where three aggressively average Rocket League players talk about everything RLCS with your hosts, Ace, Code Red Jack, Kyle Cube, and AJ Binky. So, if you've ever wondered when the best time to go for Boost Over Ball is, you've come to the right place.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Boost Over Ball podcast. On today's episode, I get to sit down and have another conversation with Bel Air Baller about the concept of figuring teams out and the current state of RLCS as it has happened so far this season. So sit back, enjoy the episode, and hopefully you enjoy this interview with Bel Air Baller. On the Chalked cast, right? We were talking about this a little bit before we were going into it, but with Beast Mode, with Farah, they were talking about a little bit jokingly and a little bit talking about the, in air quotes, figuring teams out. Mm-hmm. Right? So it's like, CJ is convinced that when teams say like, oh, we've just figured them out, it's like they're like hiding industry secrets. they're trying to prevent people from understanding what's going on. But Farah and Beast Mode kind of had some thoughts about that, and so I thought that would be a good topic for an episode to talk about, like, what goes into figuring teams out. Have they, have some teams really been, has their playstyle been exposed, their weaknesses found? What can they do to right the ship? That kind of thing. So thank you for joining me today, and I'm very interested to see some of your takes on this topic.
Of course. I mean, I wish I was a little bit more informed on what specifically Farah and Beast Mode had said. But I feel like it's one of those things where, it's a cliche, right? Like figuring teams out. It's, I don't know if maybe I'll save it for once we get rolling.
Okay. Well, I'll jump right in then, and I'll talk about something that Beast Mode said, specifically for North America, when talking about Gen G. Right, Gen G had a fantastic fall split. Winning the fall major. They looked, good in spring split. They've missed like 3 grand finals. Total. They have not looked as good in the spring split. They're currently sitting outside of LAN contention in North America, and Beast Mode had said when Gen G first came to North America, he would be like afraid to play Appjack. Like for Appjack on the ball, he looked, he was dangerous. He was a threat, and he said as the season has gone on, it's less scary to play against someone like apparently Jack, because he understands, what he likes to do and how he does things. He kind of compared it to Atomic on G2. He said Atomic fakes almost every time. So
I remember him saying that, yeah.
Yeah, so like you can kind of like gather a little bit from playing them so frequently. So like a move from EU to NA, at first like really takes everybody by surprise. No one understands the play style, but as we move on, their results have been steadily declining. What do you think about that?
I don't know. It's tough because I feel like Rocket League is at some points and I'm not a player or a coach, right? So like people could have more informed opinions, but I feel like Rocket League's too fluid for stuff like that. I don't feel like it's really because there's no set plays, there's no positions, there's like play styles in a general sense, but it's so fluid that I feel like the idea of figuring a team out isn't really super realistic. Like maybe something like you were talking about with Beast Mode talking about Atomic. If he's going to fake every single time, that's something that you can kind of identify and like build on and give yourself a better chance. But as far as this like painting with a broad brush, like the region has figured out Gen G, I just don't know if that's something that I fully agree with. You know what I mean? Like maybe in like there's little like bits and pieces of stuff like that. Maybe even 1-to-1 situations. Like this split, Space Station has beat Furia 3 of 3 times. Like clearly Space Station does something that Furia just doesn't have an answer to that they're gonna have to overcome. But as far as like, yeah, NA's just figured out Furia. Like I feel like that's just kind of like a it's just like a sports cliche that's like a great crutch for like I don't want to go super into it. Like it's these platitudes of like um, they just want it more. Um, they figured it out. They're winning the turnover battle. Like these things that are like they could be true, but they don't tell enough of the story to be like 100% true. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I totally understand. So then that kind of like feeds into my next question of if maybe like saying, oh, we've figured them out is kind of a cop out answer. Do you think it could be just like more effective game planning? Right? So like you play G2, Atomic's gonna fake. Like that's something that like Beast Mode talked about, and I've seen it happen. He does do that. He's a fantastic player, right? And like there's like multiple levels to like game planning, right? It's like you play version 1, and before this split it was like, oh, you got to worry about Beast Mode doing Beast Mode things, but now they have Daniel, so it's harder to game plan, so they've had more success. So
Yeah.
without
I,
go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just gonna to build on that point. Like, I feel like it's easier to like figure a team out if that team only does kind of like one thing, right? Like, it's impossible to figure out like like what we're seeing from V1, what I anticipate from that team, like even Carmine Core, like they can attack you in varied ways, or even like Liquid, they can like pick up the pace when they need to. Maybe Liquid's not a great example because I feel like they do pretty consistently look to pressure the ball and steal boost and kind of constrict, and you can kind of beat them going the other way. But like some of the best teams, you can't figure them out because they can attack you from different ways. Like it's very challenging to figure out a team if they can beat you from multiple different spots on the pitch. But then you talk about a team like G2 where forever their bread and butter was like passes into the midfield, like trying to beat you in transition and just get the ball really going side to side and then kind of attacking from these aggressive angles and taking these like weird glancing blows. And that's really hard to play against because you can't really set up for it. But like a Gen G, if you're going to like let's say you can figure them out, like it's kind of Jack in the midfield, um, Chronic looking to create by himself off of solo play flip resets. It's Nolly looking to put them away from these kind of goofy angles, like he's not really creating for himself. So in that sense you can kind of figure out like what positions that you can kind of see the field in, you can figure out like which ones of those are actually dangerous and which are not. But I feel like I'm just rambling into several different tentacles, so maybe you can catch me and
Well, I mean, but that's like kind of the beauty of this conversation, right? It like splinters off into like so many different things, right? Because like we're seeing the best teams, like your version 1s, your complexities when they're on, your phase clans, your Carmine Corp, BDS, Vitality, especially. Like the most successful offenses are the multifaceted offenses, right? The people that can beat you in multiple different ways.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking that, like, in my opinion, the Daniel led Space Station is like the perfect example. That was one dimensional. Like Daniel was going to beat you with a solo play, or Arsenal was going to demo you. Like those were the only ways that they were going to look threatening.
Yeah, his time of possession was so high that really all you had to know was where is Daniel, and you can mitigate like 80% of the risk.
Exactly.
Like, you don't have to worry about getting burned for an entire series by Arsenal. If you do, it's like it really is a pretty rare thing to happen, you know. I'm with you on that.
And so, like, you see, like, addition by subtraction, like, losing Daniel actually helps Space Station because it forces them to be multi-dimensional in offense.
And it is kind of, they're such a funky case because if I had to give like examples I felt really good about figuring teams out, they're like right in the middle where it's like I have no idea how they've been so consistent because clearly addition by subtraction, like if you just did like if you're like playing 2K, like their overall team rating has dropped by like a dozen points easily with the removal of Daniel, but somehow they're still finding like ways to win. And like obviously the addition of Hoxer has been huge, like him allowing them to like continue consistent offensive pushes where other times they might kind of get cut out. He's able to kind of, instead of trying to make a play necessarily just to score the ball, making a play to keep an offensive possession going for longer to allow Arsenal to find those funky bumps and backside demos and steal corner boosts and allow LJ to find space. So, you know, LJ really still is kind of a one-stop shop in a lot of ways with what their offense is, but it's tough to figure out because he, as an entity, in the same way he was with the Oxygen, he is able to put the ball away from so many different like variables that you can't just be like, this is going to be a flip reset. Like maybe he'll fake and go for a ground pinch. Maybe he'll go off the back wall and try and get a funky double into like an upper 90. Maybe he'll just take it solo and drive it into the corner. Like LJ is, you know, is a special specimen. But I'm just getting excited and talking a lot.
Yeah,
for
no.
me.
I mean, I'm glad you bring up Oxygen because LJ almost single-handedly carried that team kicking and screaming into a major.
Yeah.
And people like forget that. And so like the example that I like to give, like based on real sports, like with draft season coming up for so many like professional sports, Space Station has a really high floor, in my opinion. Like they're like a bad performance from Space Station is not gonna be like absolutely like devastating. Like they'll be able to take a game or two. They may not look great, but like they'll be decent. But their ceiling isn't as high as like a V1, a complexity, a phase. Like they don't have that like absolute pop off potential. Like Vatira's gonna go and carry the entire team through an entire event kind of thing.
Sure.
But like they're gonna be there because they're just consistent. So like
there's a very small chance that they'll win the entire thing, but they'll definitely be competitive.
Exactly. Like top 8, I think is like top 8 at the major. Top, sit. I think they're still doing the double elimination. Like the kind of current format that we've been rocking with. It is just double elimination stuff. I mean, I think that a top 6 could be possible for Space Station. It's going to depend on quite a bit on some of the EU teams that they run into, but I mean, I think that should they make the major, I think that they will perform better than people expect.
I agree. I'm curious where you land when talking about whether teams figure him out or not. Because you talked about CJ talking, like maybe jokingly talking about like hiding industry secrets. Do you recall what Farah had to say about it? Because Beast Mode, like one part of it is he's actively on a team. They're a new team that are still trying to figure themselves out. And he's younger. Farah's kind of been there, done that, and has a different perspective. So do you remember like Farah's thoughts on it?
I mean, I think Farah kind of had a similar thought to what you said. Like, you're not really going to ever like fully figure a team out just because of like how random the game is. And like, I mean, compared to like, you think of like basketball, right? All the dead ball situations that you can like draw plays for hockey to a lesser extent, and to football, you can draw up plays and ideas on what you want to do. But in Rocket League, really, you can only do that on kickoffs.
Yeah.
So like, I would say 90-something% of the game is up to, game sense, player IQ, rotations, and then just, for a lack of a better word, randomness of the series of events that happen.
Because like in traditional sports, you can figure out a lot of stuff. You can figure out hand signals. You can figure out like play sets and structures. Like if you're dribbling the ball down the court in the NBA, you can see like, oh, they're in like pistol. Like we kind of know what actions they can do off of this. But Rocket League, there's no outside of a kickoff, like you're saying. There's like how many like dead ball situations are there where the team is like, oh, we have space, we can kind of do something. But it's not like you can like maneuver yourself into a situation and be like, and offense.
Yeah.
Like it's always it's always going. So I don't know. I just feel like at the end of the day, like there's little things you can do to kind of put yourself in a better situation, but ultimately, like in almost all situations, it's just talent based. Like I feel like it's a better argument to like go a rung lower. Like you wouldn't say like, oh, North America's figured out SUP. It's like no, SUP just isn't as talented as the other teams. That's
Yeah,
kind of
no.
it. It's not like there's no secret sauce really, like there's things you can exploit. Like if you're playing against version 1, you definitely want to be cognizant of the fact that Com will be coming at you constantly. You want to always be checking behind yourself because he's going to try and get backside demos and things like that. But ultimately there's this two-headed dragon that can just score from anywhere, so you can't really like figure that out. Maybe you can figure out ways to like mitigate that by stealing some boost, like mid boost, so that beast mode can't get those like up the sidewall full boost, like oh no, he can do anything. Like maybe you can avoid that, but also it's just based on boost spawn. Like there's just so much RNG is a dumb word that I don't really, but there's so much randomness that you know
I feel like maybe unpredictability may be a better word than
yeah,
randomness,
that's
just
a much
because
better word.
I mean, the players are so good. Like I like 50-50s aren't unpredictable or random. Like they know where the 50 is gonna go, but like where they get the 50, where the ball bounces after the 50, like when was the time the closest boost was last picked up, is so like unpredictable that you can't really game plan against people. I'm kind of with you on that one, but I'll lead that one into another question. I talked to Karma quite a while ago, but her contention was that Europe has had such a like leg up over North America because of the challenge game. Midfield challenges, being more aggressive and challenging the midfield and being able to maintain control of the ball and control of your back corner and the mid boosts is such an underrated ability, especially when you're trying to keep pressure. Like you look at Team Liquid, you look at like Carmine Corp, they're so lethal at that. The midfield challenges, especially like even as third man, like being very aggressive about it, they're able to keep the ball in play. And all like in Liquid's case, one of the reasons I like watching them so much is all three of them have the individual ability to be able to make you pay if you don't have boost. Mm-hmm. And so like you see a team like Genji that comes in, maybe changes the meta a little bit in North America. You look at a complexity that have come in and finally found some success. You look at Furia starting to maybe make some progress in the forward direction. They're a region transfer team. So do you think it's less of like figuring a team out and more of like changing the strengths of the region, right? So like Genji was so dominant in midfield challenges at the beginning of the split, or at the beginning of the season, and now that the split has gone on, teams have started to catch up.
Because that's definitely a piece of it, right? Like if they brought anything over from European Rocket League, it was the fact that Europe in a general sense is so sticky as in transition. Like there is no free, like just, oh, let me take a full field air dribble down the field. Like somebody who does that super well as Itachi. Like you're not going to be able to get down to the other side of the field just by yourself on some solo play, because Itachi is either going to be trying to bump you, get in front of the ball, get some small glancing blow. Like he's like a magnet to the ball where you never kind of find space to do what you want. And I feel like North America, like defense is a lot more like passive, right? Like you will commonly find these situations where you can like screenshot it and it's like FaZe has all three players sitting in their box. And it's just like, all right, let's hope we can defend this. Like you don't really see that in Europe. It's so like there's so much aerial chaos that kind of doesn't allow you to do that. And I definitely, to your point, like that's something that FaZe have openly talked about like looking at Gen G as kind of, an inspiration of adjusting their play style and things like that. And of course, like it's the same with everything. Like if we take the NBA, for example, teams were always running double bigs until the Warriors came in with a ton of shooting and small ball. And then the whole NBA said, all right, well, I guess we're trying to do small ball now. Like it always trickles down from the top. So if Gen G is whooping everybody and they come in and it's like, all right, well, clearly they got some secret sauce that we're not up on. So what can we kind of steal from them? So FaZe goes about trying to play a little bit of an impersonation game, and then I mean, shoot, well, you got to beat FaZe and Gen G if you want to actually do anything. So I guess we're going to do the same thing they do, and it just goes further and further down the rungs. But I feel like that's a big reason why at the end of the day Europe is probably still the stronger region, just because there's so much less freedom of what you want to do. Like it's very hard to impose your style on another team in Europe, just because they all kind of do the same thing. And hey, one of the best teams to do the European style is Carmine Corps, and they've been winning everything. And now we have Vitality, and that's a whole other story. But
I mean, it's certainly interesting. I mean, sports in general, I've heard the term thrown around a lot. It's a copycat league.
yeah,
A lot of them are. I think this is the same way, right? So, I see what you can do, and my mechanics are good enough to do what you do. Why can't we have the success that you're having, right? So you see like a team like Carmine Corp with Vatira and Seiko and Itachi playing as well as they are, and then you V1 brings in Daniel. Hey, if you can do it, we can do it. But I like Johnny was talking about in the last NA event, like Optic, and I can say the same thing for NRG to an extent. But it was almost like they were just trying to take turns, like who's going on backboard for defense, like not actually focusing on getting 50s, moving the ball away from the net. It was like, no, it's my turn on backboard. It's my turn for a long clear. It's my turn for a long clear. Like you're not gonna find success that way.
yeah, and it kind of opens up a really interesting conversation, which will evolve long term, but about like what the role of a coach in Rocket League is, because since it's so fluid, it kind of doesn't make a lot of sense to have a super regimented like playbook. Like you don't want to overwhelm the players, right? I would assume it probably makes more sense to be like, hey, here's a couple things that we're going to focus on. Here's some of the key components of our play style, and we're going to just kind of leave it there. I feel like you can kind of overwhelm a situation, and then it just gets kind of weird. Like, I don't know if you find the time to watch like the major like recaps that some of the orgs will put out. I remember V1 had put one out after last spring, I think, and they had this kind of like candid behind the scenes like conversation where they had just lost, and Beast Mode was like Fireburner was like going over some notes, and Beast Mode was like, I just need to like, I don't feel comfortable on the pitch. Like we have too many cooks in the kitchen on this situation. We kind of just need to like let it flow. Um, and like uh, to tie a bow on my point back to what you were saying, like I feel like in a lot of situations it might not always be effective to be like, okay, let's study Gen G, and here's the 20 things they do. We have to implement all of those into our game plan. It's like, all right, well then that actually at a certain point might be counterintuitive, but you know.
Yeah, and I mean, like it certainly seems to help for like a FaZe clan with Illusion, Fireburner with V1, bringing in former players, Sathu, former players to be coaches. But then you look at the other side of the coin, right? Someone like an Elevate from APAC, who Coach LBP Lachlan was with Renegades, and they found more success than they ever had at the World Championships. And he's more of a mental psychology, like supportive coach in that regard, less like technical knowledge. So I mean, I think that you could kind of find a balance between having maybe one of each, right? Like a game day coach and a like a VOD review tactics coach, because like timeouts are a minute long, right? You have a minute break in between each game, and if you want a timeout, it's an extra minute. So, like, in reality, like, speaking as a college coach, there's not really a whole lot that you can do to, like, change up the flow of a series, like, tactically in Rocket League, just because it's so unpredictable. But you can reset mentally, like, you know, get up, walk around for a second, take a drink of water, like, do something to kind of mentally reset yourself and try to prevent yourself from getting tilted.
You're pulling out the clipboard. You're like, gather around, guys. Look, all right. Like drawing up plays.
Like Pharaoh with the whiteboard that you see on the broadcasts.
Like slamming it on the ground. You're like, get out of here. But, you know, and also another big thing is like the toughest time to have the figured out conversation is during the spring split where it's double elim, like the most volatile by far. Where like after the first event, we were like, man, I guess Optic's one of the best teams in the region. And then they look lukewarm and we're all like, they're not even going to make the major. Like, it's so volatile, you know?
And then you look at like, I mean, NRG has kept themselves in it.
Yeah.
With a tremendous sprint. Like, they're not out of the conversation for the major. They're 7 points out of a spot.
Mm-hmm.
But it's extremely volatile to try and talk about, like you said, figuring teams out. But, like, looking at the results from Gen G, as the season has gone on, their results have gotten worse and worse. The consistency hasn't been there as much. Teams have started to perform better against them. So, like, maybe it's a double-edged sword, right? Maybe it's, like, teams are improving, and then the other side of that being they've figured out how to better play against Gen G. Haven't figured out, you know, them completely, but figured out how to, you know, to compete with them.
It's interesting because they're a use case where, like, Gen G's whole issue might stem from somewhere totally different, from this kind of idea of like too much success too early. Like, if we rewind all the way back to the beginning of the season, I think your average prediction for Gen G in fall was probably what, 8th place in the region, 6th to 8th. I don't think anybody at the outset was like major team for sure. And so they end up rolling the region. They come in as the number 1 seed, I'm pretty sure.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody has their doubts. Everybody is kind of putting those on display. Meanwhile, the entire split, they've been grinding like nobody's business, like completely in the lab, like getting all smelly, growing beards like they've been lost in a like deserted island. And everybody is airing their grievances about, you know, Jack's never been able to win at a major. You know, Nolly's always kind of been just kind of a piece. He's never really been the guy. Chronic's never even been at this stage. And then to be able to overcome that mountain, like, irregardless of what you say and what you hope, I would assume, especially at an earlier stage in my life, like to put myself in those shoes, how could you not pull your foot off the gas a little bit, right? Like, you kind of, like, you still want to prove it. There's still money involved. There's still pride involved. Like, it's still what you do, like, for work, but you already won a major, you know? So it's not like you really, like, have the world to prove. So I just feel like Gen G's issue might be more of that. Like, I still feel like they're going to be making the major. I'd be pretty surprised if they didn't, regardless of the point situation. Like, I just feel like they're still a really solid team who knows what they want to do, and it's really hard to slow down that style. And really, they've only lost they've only lost 4 times over the course of this split so far. 2 to Complexity, and then they lost to like Shopify to go out, and like Space Station Gaming. So you're really wrapping a lot into a Game 5 loss to Shopify. You know, to not you personally, but like as a collective, you're really wrapping a lot into that loss to like this really swinging barometer of like 40 points of confidence in one game. You know, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and they've already locked in their spot for Worlds.
Yep.
So, you know, realistically, you know, maybe a little bit of demotivation. I know they moved a couple times in there.
Moved to a new city. Yep. You know people around. You want to hang out. You move to North America. You already won it. Maybe you kind of want to, you know, hey, there's other things in life, you know.
Yeah, but
That's more my
that's
thinking on that.
that's a good point.
Now, Furia is kind of a different conversation because they've been around, they've already been here. They no longer have the lost is brand new kind of like excuse, if you want to use that as a fan. Like that's a situation where they might need to try and do something new with the players. I don't know if you're familiar with Buttery Hotness, but he's been behind the scenes helping them out as the split has gone along. So maybe he's going to bring some new juice to that situation. But I feel like when I watch them on film, like in a lot of cases, I kind of know what they're going to try and do before they do it. And also, like superseding everything, their defense is kind of ass sometimes, and that leads to like some poor losses. But they're a team that could kind of shake things up to catch up to speed. I don't know how you feel about Furia.
I mean, you think about their time back in Sam, right? When Sam was still like a, I mean, to an extent, like I feel bad saying minor region,
Oh yeah,
but like
I agree.
lesser region than like North America and EU, like, and
At the
especially
time.
especially when they were there, right? Like all offense, not much defense, like crazy mechanics, super high scoring game, like really fast paced transition play, and like, for lack of a better term, like the NA teams are built to beat other NA teams.
Hmm.
Right? Like my ultimate example for this is like, I'm gonna go like back to professional sports, right? For college football. Like you look at like the Big Ten, right? It's, big offensive linemen, big defensive
Yep.
linemen. We're gonna run the ball and you're gonna deal with it.
Wisconsin, Nebraska. Good luck stopping this.
Exactly. Yep. That's like, that's what they do. That's what the Big Ten does. They're designed to beat other Big Ten teams. And then when they come up against your SEC teams like Alabama, where it's like, you know what, we're gonna run it down your throat. Oh, but also we can spread the field and beat you that way too.
Yep.
Like that's what I feel like it's like right now, right? So NA is built to beat other NA teams, to like really battle out those games, to slog through the close series wins, and kind of grind out goals, whereas EU is more, it at least it appears to me a little bit to be more high scoring, not necessarily because the defense is worse. The defense is, I actually think, is a little bit better, but just because of the higher skill, right? They spread the field more. There's more team plays. There's more players that can just straight up beat 2-3 people at a time. So Furia, I feel like you kind of lose the excuse that they're new to the region now. They're not a relatively new roster, right? Because Lost has been there already. So you feel like some of those long clear goals, some of that like defensive lapses, like if they're gonna find success in North America, that's something that needs to get ironed out.
And it's cool that you brought up like the college football thing because that's like the variation that we started out the Rocket League conversation. Like some of your best teams are teams that can beat you in many ways, and that's exactly what like your best SEC teams can do. Like if you're an air raid offense and that's all you can do, then you can kind of get beat by better teams. Like if the only thing you can do if you're Furia is just like score in bunches, and it's like then cross your fingers and be like, hopefully they're having an off game, like it kills you. But I think like with the NBA, a lot of the games boil down to one singular stat, which is who made more 3-pointers. And I feel like in the RLCS, a stat that's similar is which teams have 3 potent offensive options. Like if we just go through, like Carmine, you're afraid of all 3. But maybe like Itachi had a great winter. Exotic can do it in spots. We saw it in Semper. He was the lead option. Vitality now, that's why they're winning, right? Like you have to fear all 3 of those players in all situations. They can all beat you. How many of those are in North America? Like how many teams are there where you're afraid of everybody? Complexity's kind of getting there. AJG is a lot better than he was. Phase, I suppose. I'm not like, I don't wake up in the middle of the night sweating because of like Sipical's offense. He can put it together sometimes, but I just feel like that's the big difference.
Yeah,
Like Europe has so many teams like that.
I mean, I feel like, and this is getting into a whole different can of worms because I have a lot, like a big bone to pick. But I feel like G2 could be that team, but they're
They could.
not,
They could. They're
And
not. They have been before, but they are not.
and they are consistently not. But I mean, it boils down to, at least for me, right? So like, in my opinion, that's why I think EU will win the spring major again, because you look at, it's like, well, holy shit, their top 5 is already emerged. They're just fighting for seeding at this point, right? It's Vitality, it's Carmine, it's BDS, who's back with Rise, it's Moist, it's Liquid.
Yeah.
That's it, and no one else is really close.
Can I ask you something about G2?
Yes.
Because you, in your conversation with them, I've quoted this on multiple podcasts and in multiple settings, something that you had said in an answer that was given by Sathu, where I think twice or 3 times in that conversation, he didn't give us like anything specific, but he kind of talked around this idea of taking accountability and how that's been a theme for their season. Did that strike you? Like, did that stick with you where you were like, huh? Because in my eyes, I was like, I wonder if behind the scenes, like to me, I just immediately think like, oh, there's some kind of turmoil where they can't get on the same page. But maybe I'm thinking too much into it. But you were there. Did you have a similar takeaway?
A little bit. I was like, it was an awesome interview. I think JNaps was like one of the most well-spoken people, like pros that I talked to, but he's been around the block. He's been there. He's one of the older pros now, which is still crazy to say because he's not old. But like, he gave very like genuine answers. He
seems open.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Sathu, he gave some good answers. I think he was a little bit more guarded in some of the things that he said. Like, you got to be a little bit careful, right? You don't want to like give away the farm for anything, right? But I think that the accountability part that G2 brings up is very interesting, because to me, my biggest gripe with G2 is their infield passing, their side-to-side passing is fantastic. When they are on offense and they get even a small iota of boost control, they look phenomenal. They're suffocating teams. They're passing around them. They're consistently beating 1 or 2 guys, and then it's like they forget to shoot. Right? Or they hit, they're hitting posts, they're hitting backboards in a place that, is not going to allow a teammate to follow up, but they still do try to follow up, and then they give up a long clear goal.
Yeah.
That it seems like the G2 MO, right? Like suffocating offense to do everything but get shots and then get scored on.
$1 million move, 10-cent finish.
Exactly. 100%. And so, like, in my eyes, the accountability thing jumped out as, like, they, especially, like, in the winter, they were a one-trick pony. It was Atomic's show.
Yep.
Right? He was doing pretty much everything for G2, when in reality, like, JNaps is on G2 and continues to be on a top team because he's really fucking good at the game.
Yeah.
Because he's JNaps. Chicago continues to play with him because Chicago's finishing ability is fantastic. Still one of the top strikers in the world, in my opinion. But to have that much offensive opportunity and availability on your team and to not score more goals than they do, that's where the accountability comes in. So,
I wonder where they are right now this season, because for a while they were number 1 in goals and assists. But where do they lie now as far as North America goes? I wonder if they're kind of like in the middle or what. I'm trying to look real quick.
Yeah, that I am not sure about.
Because, I mean, you're totally right. Like, they still create opportunities. I feel like something that has caught my eye multiple times over the course of this season has been JNaps' ability to understand the situation and sometimes slow down the pace of play to kind of offer some of that variability we were talking about, where it's not all just bang, bang, side to side. Like, sometimes JNaps will slow it down and kind of suck in some gravity himself and try and set up some different opportunities for the team. But I don't know. I'm interested that you still look at Chicago with so much intrigue, because I feel like he's somebody who is kind of an X factor in whether or not they're contending with the big boys or not. I feel like he's kind of had a less than average split by his own standards.
Yeah, and I would agree that I think quite frankly G2 has been underwhelming this split in general. Like they're sitting 8th place currently in the spring standings, but they're 6 points out of a major spot right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I've seen the talent from G2 and I know like how it goes for them. Like I've seen the peak, right? Like we like at Worlds, right? We were there. Like G2 looked incredible until they didn't in the finals.
Until the finals.
So I looked at it also. They did not play a single non-Western Hemisphere team until the grand finals.
All Sam and NA?
Yes.
Wow.
So
and then they just got rolled by Europe.
So, but part of that is I don't know how much that was G2 being bad and how like BDS was just on another level.
Also a huge moment. Like
right. Exactly.
Who knows how you react to that. Yeah.
So like I don't know how much of that is, G2 shitting the bed or, or what, but it's it's crazy to think about because it seems like I mean, like in I'll use soccer as an example, right? They keep track of like shot stats, but that's just like anytime somebody shoots.
Sure.
But like, shot like scoring chances or like shots on target is like 2, 3.
Yeah.
So it's like, are G2 really creating as much of an offensive threat as it? Like I feel like the stats don't line up with the eye test with G2.
It's similar to like a Liquid, like their whole MO is peppering the net, right? So like 18 shots, they're not really trying to score necessarily 18 times or looking to like loosen up the defense, get them moving side to side, get a quick boost steal, something like that. But yeah, I get what you're saying. Who do you think, trivia time, quick trivia break.
Oh, man.
Who do you think has the most goals per game in North America over the last 6 months? This one's probably easier than you think.
First Killer?
FaZe as a unit, yes.
Oh, as a unit, okay.
Yes, correct. We have 2 teams that are tied for second. One of them is probably fairly easy. The other one is not.
Is one of them Complexity?
No, Complexity is top 5.
Oh, then
Complexity is 5th.
Is my whole argument going out the window? Is one of them G2?
G2 is 4th.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's in the last 6 months.
Correct. Just online, by the way.
Yeah.
No lands.
I feel like it's not version 1 then. Like there's more of a recency bias with them. It's not
they're low scoring.
Certainly not Optic. It's not Space Station.
Nope.
Gen G.
You're eliminating a bunch of great ones. Gen G is one of them. Who is the other one? Who is at Gen G is tied for second with 2.32 goals per game with one other squad.
Is it Furia?
No.
I said FaZe. I got Gen G.
You have not said the team yet.
No, I yeah.
Oh, you know
It's
what?
not
I bet if I
NRG.
get rid of this, it'll change it pretty drastically.
It's not Shopify.
It is.
Is it really? I guess that does make
Shopify
sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who was it? Nolly on the Chalked Cast was talking about. He's like, Shopify should be like so much better than they are. They dominate scrims. They've been together for so long. They're a good team. So that does track. I'd buy that.
On the Wave Dash pot, and the number changes a little bit. I just eliminated qualifiers, and the number drops a little bit, but they're still a lot higher than I would have guessed. But on Wave Dash, we had Raw Greg on, Optics coach.
Yeah.
And we do like a stock segment of like, who are you buying and selling? And like instantaneously, he was like, Parth, I'm buying. I was like, dang, I don't know if I've ever heard anybody be like Parth.
Nolly said that too. That's crazy.
That's so weird. Hey, they got to be onto something.
Hey, I don't know if you've heard the memes about Magic Bear from Optic.
Nuh-uh.
So
no.
apparently he's like a scrim monster.
Oh yeah,
Like
yeah,
like
yeah.
double
CJ is like the biggest cheerleader in the world.
Yeah, for the bear, like double, triple
Yeah.
flip resets, like all kinds of crazy mechanics. Like looks incredible, and then they play in front of in front of people, and he's like, "Yep, nope, forgot how to play, can't do it."
The Monstars stole all his power.
Exactly. I mean, Beast Mode was saying that he did not think Optic was going to make it. They were calling it Choke Dick.
I like that. Yeah, that's a situation where like, because so much of it is mental, right? Like, obviously, we lose all the physical elements of traditional sports, like LeBron being like a freight train of a human who's one of the most athletic people we've ever seen. Everyone's even there, right? In Rocket League. So much the mental aspect is cranked up tenfold. Like that's a situation with Optic where like Magic Bear continuing to be so peak and valley between scrims and the actual games is notable. Also, that's a team that has like a lot of pressure. Like they came together so that they could make majors under a big org with some big names, probably making some big money. Like I feel like that situation just has to be a hindrance. There's no way that's like beneficial to have that much pressure. Same situation with Furia. That's why I don't feel like they're going to make the spring major. Like how many teams have more pressure to make the major than Furia does? And they're in a situation where they have to perform in order to get there. It's not like they're at the top of the points with complexity. Like they literally have to do incredibly well, and they haven't done that yet. So I feel like there's too much funkiness, there's too much juju floating around for me to like that situation for them.
I think G2's got quite a bit of pressure, more than people think too. They're currently sitting like we talked about 6 points adrift from the major conversation, and I mean Europe is pretty much done and dusted at this point in terms of who's making it. In my personal opinion, that they haven't played their last regional, which is this upcoming weekend. But in NA, you have like even Shopify in 10th, right? They're 8 points out of a major berth. Like they still have everything to play for.
NRG has a puncher's chance.
Yep.
Yeah.
Shopify, Energy, G2, Furia, Gen G all have a chance to make it because they're not currently sitting in spots. So, like, I mean, complexity, right? Like, you talked about peaks and valleys, right? A win to a, round 2 lower bracket exit.
How did that unfold for them? How did they find themselves there? Complexity.
So, as far as I remember,
They lose to V1 out, and then
yeah.
And do you remember who they lost in lowers?
Yeah, I do.
NRG with the God play.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a tough loss for sure.
It is. But, I mean, as much as I I love to see the NRG roster coming back and performing well, that's a series that you got to have.
Yeah.
I mean, hats off to them for, and it showed that they, they were kind of on their shit, right? So they beat G2 in 5. They beat Complexity in 5. They beat Furia in 6. Furia was looking pretty good. They took a game off FaZe, which, Shopify, Optic couldn't do. So, I mean, NRG had themselves a good tournament, but that's a series you have to have if you're Complexity.
Yeah. I mean, you could say the same thing about Furia too, right? Like, if you look back and you end up not making this major, I mean, you just look at that NRG series and you're like, what are we doing? Like, you got to be able to beat them. But, that's just kind of how RLCS goes sometimes. Like, even, I mean, to keep, recircling the same topics with, the mental, like, Garrett tweeted in the middle of the event. He was like, I can't tell you guys, how much of this is mental. Like, they still obviously have the talent. It's just like, can we beat this team in front of us, and ultimately it crumbles once you get eviscerated by the actual top team. Like there's a clear distance between you and a FaZe clan or something like that, but there's no reason that NRG can't make the major. I don't know if we necessarily want to just I could go on and on about NRG, but
I mean, there's certainly a lot of talking points to have to do with NA. Right. And so, in my opinion, a lot of the conversation stems from, have these teams been figured out? Right. I feel like, to continue, the last time you were on, we talked about, our, our word association drinking game, right? Like mechanical player.
Yeah.
Figuring a team out, maybe another word we add. So if you're playing along with that one, sorry. But I mean, you can contribute. I feel like you can contribute a lot of the like figuring a team out to the amount of times that these teams play each other.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So like you get to like a major event, right? And Furia, before they move over, they come in and they, Crew. These are teams that, NA, that Europe haven't seen, right? They only see them potentially 3-4 times a year if you make all your events, if you make your lands, at boot camp maybe a little bit, if you scrim them. But in reality, like, Gen G has played, FaZe, in a like a live event, like maybe online, but also in LANs, 20-30 times.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how much of it is maybe not like figuring it out, but like understanding what they like to do, not being as like, because Beast Mode talked about it at like at the LAN event, like at Worlds. He's like, Yan is incredible. Like he's a terrifying player to play against because of the things that he can do with the ball. He said, I used to play it like you used to come and play like when they first moved over, I'd play Yan in ones and like it's like shit bricks. Like it's Yan in ones. He's gonna like make you look like an idiot.
Yeah.
But it's been a year and a half now since they moved over. He goes, I beat him in ones all the time now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, part of that is just Beast Mode being a freak, but you kind of lose a little bit of that, like, back to NRG and Garrett, the mental, right? Like how much of it is like the unknown. That's like the some of like the biggest like advantages like some of these like lesser region teams have, or like some of these like European teams against NA teams. Just you don't know.
Yeah, because I mean, we're definitely not watching as much film as a collective community of like Sam and Mina as we are in A and EU. Like I can tell you the ins and outs of the 14th best team in Europe probably more than I can tell you the 5th best team in South America, and that's not necessarily fair to that region. But like, there's part of it where you can't really figure out a region that you like. We don't really watch as much. But the other side of it is there's like no pressure. Like if you're Crew coming into the last major, you can get last place and it kind of doesn't matter. It's like, well, like we gave it our best shot. It was our first time here. We're the second seed from South America. Or, hey, you can just win. And, if you're on the other side of Crew in like a big moment where it's like, that if you lose, like you're way more afraid of losing than you are like confident you can win. Like, I don't know if you've been watching like the NBA playoffs, like the Miami Heat. Everybody they've gone up against, it's like the Heat are clearly less talented than this other team, and that in and of itself like intrinsically applies more pressure to the situation, because once it starts going sideways, in the back of your mind that you should be beating that team, and then it just gets worse and worse where like you can kind of just like fall apart, so that's kind of the sneaky advantage of like these Sam teams, and even like Rule 1 who just qualified. Like,
yeah, and Garrett talked about on like the main broadcast, like was doing an interview with the guys, and he had said that once they dropped down to lower brackets, it was like all the pressure went away. He's like, well, everyone expects us to lose, right? Like,
yeah.
So may as well just like play how we want to play, and that's really telling, right? So like as soon as is in their minds the pressure goes away, they put in their best result of the season, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's like not close. And then you think about it, and it's like, okay, well, this is a team that has been going through closed qualifier. Right? Like they almost didn't, like, had they not performed in this last event, if they wanted to compete, they would have had to go through the open qualifier in terms of points.
Yeah.
NRG in the open qualifier, all 3 former world champions. I mean, I say that, but like Solary exists, but like, still.
Yeah.
But like, I like it's a roster that should still be competing. So it's the mental aspect cannot be downplayed enough. And I think that, like, I guess like the big conclusion that we've come to from like this whole conversation is like, maybe it's not figuring teams out. Maybe it's the mentality about figuring teams out.
Maybe it's not figuring other teams out. Maybe it's figuring yourself out.
Oh, that's a good one.
It's the friends we made along the way, you know?
Exactly. I feel like
Yeah.
this episode has just been like, we've been so far off topic talking about stuff, but like, I think you're right. I mean, in reality, like how you view your own, like they talk about it in like professional sports too, right? Like in order to be like the best in your position in your sport in the world, to some extent, you have to think you're the shit. You have to think that you're the best, like, that your shit doesn't stink, that you're,
Definitely.
no one can touch you. And I feel like it's got to be the same way for Rocket League, right? I think that's one of the things that people love to hate about Vatira is he's a little bit cocky. He can back it up because he is that good, but is he that good because he thinks that way? And I don't think it hurts him.
Same reason like Archie is polarizing. Granted, Vatira has clearly shown he has more chops to back it up,
Yeah.
which definitely helps. But, I agree. Like, everybody in the NBA probably thinks they're the best player. Like, you've been the best whole life up until this point. Like, how could you not? And the same kind of goes over to the RLCS. But I feel like a conversation like this, it's fruitful to bounce all around just because at its core, like, figuring out a team is like, it's not really like rooted in any like science or fact or stats or anything. Kind of just like this like open conversation. So, it was nice to like bounce around and talk about the different elements that could contribute to figuring out a team. And hey, maybe we still don't know the answer.
Yeah, maybe we're we're gonna wait 2 weeks and then everything that we've just said is wrong because Optic makes the major and
Optic makes it, yeah.
Asset Space Station falls out and it's G2 is back in, Fury is back in.
Yeah, we're totally wrong. Shopify makes it, and, everything falls apart that we thought. But
Parth gets spring split MVP.
Yeah, he's averaging like 3 goals a game, and they run over everybody.
Optic
Who knows?
just hypnotizes Magic Bear into thinking he's playing scrims instead of the real games.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know how much longer you want to go, but I'm just having the thought of like we touched on traditional sports so much throughout this. It is interesting because I've been into other like esports in the past, and I've always kind of looked at them more in a vacuum. And like Rocket League really just feels like you can still kind of talk about it like a traditional sport in a lot more ways than you can like other sports. Like I watched a ton of League of Legends back in the day for like years, and I never found myself being like, this is just like the MLB. Like I never did that. But in the RLCS, like anything I talk about, it's like that's kind of like football. It's kind of like hockey,
I mean, it's just like the fact that there's a ball and goals kind of like lend itself to being like compared to regular sports. And like also in my opinion, I feel like of the like major tier 1 esports, Rocket League is probably the one that like, you've never watched esports before. Rocket League's probably the easiest to get into. There's a ball, they put it in net. Good. Like that's like super easy to understand.
Hit ball, score goal.
Exactly. Literally.
All right, I got the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And then if you are more into it, you can, get into more of the nuances and all of the like nerdy stuff that we like to geek out about, boost usage, shots, big pads stolen, stuff like that. So, there's so many nuances, like just like for all esports, but I think Rocket League really benefits from being able to like relate to other sports just for like the larger appeal factor.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm interested to see what other opinions like because I don't think the figuring it out conversation is going to go away. Like cliches like that have a life cycle for a reason. I'm sure it'll be back, but we're just going to get even more data as we get this major and going towards Worlds. Like we're going to have a lot more of an informed opinion about what teams have, figured out what teams. Like if Gen G end up not winning anything else in North America, or even if we get to majors and they kind of get stomped on, like, maybe they've been like figured out in some ways, but I don't know. I'm rambling again.
Hey, I do it too. So it's just nice to be able to talk to people about Rocket League. It's nice to be able to have one of these like meandering conversations like we've had just based off of like one major question. So I thank you so much for taking the time to come and talk and lending your expertise and your knowledge.
It's a pleasure as always. Always happy to be on, and thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you everyone so much for tuning into another episode of the Boost Over Ball podcast. We ask that you rate us wherever you get podcasts, as it really helps us out. Check out our Twitter, our Instagram, join our Discord. All of those links can be found on our website at www.boostoverball.com. And please give Belair Baller a follow on Twitter. We will leave his link in the episode description. Thank you again. And from us at the Boost Over Ball podcast, as always, remember to choose Boost over Ball.
Thank you for listening to the Boost Over Ball podcast. Make sure to check out our website, www.boostoverball.com, and rate us wherever you listen to podcasts.